What's poppin', y'all? Welcome back to another episode of my series on the 48 Laws of Power, where I draw a parallel from history lesson given in each chapter to an event that happened in music. And today is Law 18. And looking back on how Kid Cudi nearly destroyed his career, and it was nobody's fault but his own. Kid Cudi has finally dropped Man on the Moon 3. It sold 148,000 first week, which is his second highest first week sales for an album since Man on the Moon 2 released in 2010. And this album released in an era where it's much harder to sell albums first week, so this is all the more impressive. Law 18 states, "Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous." The world is dangerous and enemies are everywhere. Everyone has to protect themselves. A fortress seems the safest, but isolation exposes you to more dangers than it protects you from. It cuts you off from valuable information and makes you conspicuous and an easy target. Better to circulate among people, find allies, mingle. You are shielded from your enemies by the crowd. Shi Huangdi was the first emperor of China. He was crowned at the very young age of 13, but prior to that unification, the region known as China now had well over a dozen countries and provinces. He started off as the king of Qin and a warrior with very little mercy. He used both violence and finesse to conquer the provinces around his own Qin. At this point in time, the whole region of China was made up of many different provinces that were essentially their own country and culture. What Huang did was break up the feudal system, and in order to keep track of the over 100,000 members of the royal families of each of those provinces, he moved them to the capital of his now united China, with the most important of them in a palace. He brought together many of those walls on the borders into what is now known as the Great Wall of China. He had a standardized written language for everyone, as well as laws. During this process, though, he decided to outlaw the writings and teachings of Confucius that had basically become its own religion in Chinese culture and other provinces. But under his order, he had thousands of books related to Confucius or his teachings burned, and anyone who was spreading Confucius or quoted him was beheaded. This garnered him a lot of enemies within his kingdom, and he became more worried about his own safety. That would evolve into a paranoia. One writer of the time said that Qin has been victorious for 4 generations, yet has lived in constant terror and apprehension of destruction. Shi Huang lived in the most incredible palace of that time. It had 270 different pavilions that were all connected by secret underground passages that let the emperor move around the palace with nobody seeing him. He slept in a different room every night, and anybody who would look at him accidentally was beheaded. There was a very small circle of men close to him that knew where he would be, and if any of them shared that information, they would be killed too. This seclusion let his powers slowly slip from him. Eunuchs and ministers would put political policies into place without his approval or even notifying him, and they began to plot against him as well. He had become emperor just by the name and title, but with almost none of the influence. He still had the power, but barely enacted it because he was so isolated. Even when the emperor would leave the palace, he would move around in a disguise, so nobody knew it was him. On one of the trips, he just suddenly died, and his body was brought back to the palace in a disguise too. They packed his dead body in a cart filled with salted fish, so the stench of his dead body would be hidden, and nobody would find out about his death. He died away from all family and friends. It was only his minister and a few eunuchs that accompanied him. Nobody knows how he died, but there are speculations that he was poisoned by his ministers, those same people enacting policies and conspiring against him. His isolation made him weaker. He was in a fortress, and he lost contact with all of his sources of power and people that would feed him information. He lost his ears to the problems and the thoughts of the people in the empire, as ironic as it is. Him isolating put him in more danger than it did safety. He was so far away from anyone, he couldn't even hear the plots against him. Kid Cudi had burst into the scene known for his message of being a loner, Mr. Solo Dolo, the Lonely Stoner. His first and most important relationships prior to that of Kanye West, who would bring him into the industry by signing him to Good Music, were with Emile Haney, Dot the Genius, Rat-a-Tat, and Plain Pat. Cudi's debut hit, Day and Night, was produced by Dot the Genius, but the fan favorite and debut album of Kid Cudi, after the great reception of his mixtape A Kid Named Cudi, was Man on the Moon. Man on the Moon had all the tracks produced by Emile, Plain Pat, Dot the Genius, Rat-a-Tat, or Kanye West. A track here and there were produced by other producers, but these names made up nearly the entire album. And Man on the Moon was a huge success, with the hit song Day and Night, as well as Pursuit of Happiness. The project sold 104,000 first week, charting behind Jay-Z's Blueprint 3 that he contributed to as well. Kid Cudi's follow-up release would be Man on the Moon 2. The sequel released in 2010, and once again the production on this album was littered with familiar names. Emile produced 9 tracks on this album, more than half, with production from Plain Pat and Dot the Genius on most of the other tracks. The crew put together this album, and it had the hit song Erase Me with Kanye West and improved sales of 169,000 first week. Kid Cudi would also make contributions to Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy that same year on Gorgeous and All of the Lights. But things began to change after this, Man on the Moon 2. Instead of continuing the series and likely having a successful Man on the Moon 3, Kid Cudi decided to say, the hell with that, and his next album released in 2012 would be the self-titled Wizard, the group he formed with producer and close friend Dot the Genius. He announced it in January of 2011 on Twitter. Pushing for a summer release of the Wizard album, I produce and play guitar on everything with my main man, Dot the Genius. He's learning bass. The Maniac film will be released later this year. Cage, Shia, and I really want everything just right, and I need the proper time for scoring. The edit must be epic. Wizard is a rock album, no raps, just singing. Brand new thing, flavor. Dose of Dopeness, however, will be on the Wizard album as a bonus jam. About time, eh? I've been wearing the same jeans for months, and I feel good about that dedication. Working on some new Jay and Ye stuff. I'ma finish up some things, and then I'ma chop it up with y'all. Word. And officially going ham. Oh, I forgot the best news ever. New mixtape, A Man Named Scott. That's this summer, for all those who mess with my raps. This is for you, since I'm gonna be all rocked out with the Wizard stuff. Also, it's free. Yes. Man, I'm really happy to finally get all that good news out there. More to come, not even close. Oh, in New York, catch me if you can. I'll start filming How to Make It in March. Domingo Dean stuff. Legit. Spoiler alert, that A Man Named Scott mixtape never released. But this was a massive risk. Why would Cudi leave all the other producers and make a rock type album? This was also under his newly formed label imprint Wicked Awesome Records, under Good Music, and through Republic. An interesting note is where this album was recorded. At a listening session in LA, Dot the Genius said he wanted to record the album in the best studio possible, but Cudi strongly disagreed. Cudi believed that the album needed a raw and gritty feel, which led to recording on either the tour bus or Kid Cudi's home. This album had zero production from Emile or Plain Pat. It was all just Dot and Cudi. Sales had more than halved from Man on the Moon 2. Wizard only did 66,000 copies first week, which Cudi hopped on Twitter to show his frustration. Okay, so just a heads up. My weak label only shipped 55K physicals because they treated this like some indie side project tax write-off. So I apologize on behalf of my weak major label. And I apologize for the lack of promo again, my weak major label. They tried to rush me through this so I can just give them another Man on the Moon. But guess what? Screw that. Next album is Wizard. Man on the Moon 3 on hold till 2014. Who mad? Not me and Dot the Genius. So it's definitely going to be tough to find one in the stores, guys. I'm sorry about that. I gotta go out and find one too, because my weak label never even gave us a copy of our own album. Fail. I'm letting Universal Republic have it. Screw it. What they gonna do? Spank me? And Teleport to Me, Jamie ain't on the radio. Like, hello? Hit. This project wasn't received well by the fans either, even though it was number 1 on the iTunes charts. The reviews were very mixed since this sounded nothing like they were listening up to until that point. But Kid Cudi not only isolated himself in his own home while recording this and away from his other producers, he took it one step further, and when he announced his next album, Indicud, he would have no production from anybody on there other than himself, with Hit Boy co-producing one track and Dot just doing drums on 2 tracks. In 2013 is where the friction began between Kid Cudi and Kanye West too. He first announced that he was leaving Good Music in April. On April 2nd, 2013, Cudi announced on Power 106 in Los Angeles that he was no longer under the Good umbrella. Man, everything is cool, Cudi said at the time. Everything is peace with everybody on the label. There's never been any issues, but I am announcing that I'm no longer on Good Music. And this is something that no one knows, really. I'm no longer on Good Music. Cudi went on to clarify that it was a tough decision because he viewed West as a big brother. Cudi said that as he broke the news that he wanted to go in his own direction with Wicked Awesome Records to West over the phone. West got it because he, too, wanted to head in his own direction. Cudi would release his 3rd solo album, Indicud, only 10 days later with a massive sales increase, since this was his own project, not under a separate name. It sold 139,000 copies first week, but there were many criticisms about it too. Many critics and fans said this didn't sound anything like Man on the Moon Kid Cudi, and of course it didn't. None of those producers were on Indicud. He distanced from all of them. And during this project, Kid Cudi was just learning how to produce. This was his last project under Good Music, and at this point, Cudi was further removed from the industry. He wasn't working with many other rappers or artists other than the core close people like King Chip. His original producers hadn't been seen in the past 2 projects, and he also voiced some frustrations at his appearance on Kanye West's Yeezus album on the track Guilt Trip in the beginning of 2014. As a matter of fact, 2014 was filled with Kid Cudi coming at his former close friends. The vocal that I did on that song was a couple of years old. I forgot which session it was, but it was just a reference, Cudi said. I discovered that I was on the song via Twitter. I saw kids hitting me up like, "Are you on Guilt Trip?" or saying, "Great job." And I'm like, what the hell is everyone talking about? So I go on Twitter, and then I hear the song, and I'm like, okay, I know the beat, I know the song. Then I'm like, oh man, okay. Part of me was flattered, like, it's kind of cool that he thought of me. Then I started thinking about it more. It was like, why not call me and have me come in there and give it? Why underuse me? Why put 4 bars of vocals to coax my fans into thinking this is a legitimate Kid Cudi feature on this song? And it isn't. This is an understandable frustration from Kid Cudi. He wasn't even notified of it. But his actions the rest of the year are what make the comments around this look worse than if this were just a standalone event. He released Satellite Flight on February 25th to sales of 87,000 first week, entirely produced by Kid Cudi and a couple with Dot the Genius, but still, no Plain Pat or Emil. It was marketed as the prelude to Man on the Moon 3 and received okay reviews. That same year, Cudi had criticized Lupe Fiasco for charging fans $500 for a personalized verse from him and publicly said on Twitter, "What are you doing with the money you're making from this, at Lupe Fiasco? Are you giving some of this money you're about to make to a charity?" Or before Layden calling the idea a bit sketch. Fiasco then shot back with a series of tweets that read in part, "A custom verse is not to swindle you as my competitors would have you believe. It's to give you total control over what you want to hear." In 2015, Kid Cudi would also randomly go at Kendrick Lamar subliminally on Twitter saying, "Dear black artists, don't talk down to the black community like you're God's gift to niggas everywhere." This was in reference to a cover story that Kendrick Lamar did for Billboard, when Kendrick had just been featured on his Solo Dolo Part 2 song on Indicud and has been known for voicing support for Kid Cudi and his music. Lupe Fiasco doesn't have beef with many artists, almost none actually, but he has made it abundantly clear that if he runs into Kid Cudi, it is the only rapper which he wants to happen, that he runs into him, and that it won't be a pretty sight. He said in multiple lives that Kid Cudi has done foul things to him and everyone who was close to him and wanted good things for his well-being, either a part of good music or just closely affiliated with good music like himself. Kid Cudi had also become known for liberally blocking people on social media that wondered, questioned, or told him to go back to his old style. He was not only building this fortress around him musically in real life, where his collaborations with producers, especially the ones who helped craft the sound that made him famous, was minimal, and other artists became almost zero. He was also building up a fortress away from his original fans. I'm not the type of person that will say celebrities or artists just need to sit there and get clowned, attacked, and hated on social media, but never block anyone, because that means they're hurt. Absolutely not. You should block people if they're bringing that type of energy to you. You blocking people is taking away their privilege to see and interact with your content. I'll be running my social media like Kim Jong-un. This a dictatorship. But Cudi wasn't really receiving that. He was receiving feedback and really constructive criticism from the fans, letting him know what they wanted in the product, and he refused to listen. This all culminated in the massive disaster that released on December 4th, 2015. Speedin' Bullet to Heaven was his second attempt at an alternative rock album after Wizard, and it was almost entirely self-produced, besides the co-production on the self-titled track with Plain Pat, but not a single feature on it, and it was a massive flop on every single imaginable level. It sold 19,000 copies first week. It was rated terrible by not only critics, but Kid Cudi fans too. A terrible moment. Kid Cudi must have still been suffering from delusions at that point because he didn't address any of the feedback, just called them haters. 2016 would be a big roller coaster of a year for Kid Cudi though. He briefly came out of isolation for one of the most memorable moments in recent hip-hop history, and the first time the public saw him reunited with Kanye, and that was at the Madison Square Garden Yeezy event, where they played some songs off The Life of Pablo, one of which was Father Stretch My Hands, that Kid Cudi was featured on. This was a really happy moment. Travis Scott, Kid Cudi, Kanye West, and everyone from Good Music reunited and having a good time, but it wouldn't last very long. On March 25th, Kid Cudi released the first song to his next album titled The Frequency, and produced by Plain Pat and Mike Dean, two producers the fans hadn't seen on a Kid Cudi album in years. It was received well after the terrible performance of Speedin' Bullet to Heaven, but in an interview with Billboard in April of 2016, Kid Cudi said Man on the Moon 3 would never happen. Guys, you have to realize, I came up with Man on the Moon when I was a young man, he explained. People change their vibe. We can follow the same template and do the 5-act split. Sonically, I'm still going to be where I'm at. Honestly, I was ready to live up to the obligation and do Man on the Moon 3. I haven't been messing around. I was planning on doing it after Speedin' Bullet, but the Speedin' Bullet response tore me up. It made me realize what's most important. I'm getting back on the bike again and doing what I do best. Me. His alternative rock effort broke the rapper's top 10 streak of albums after it debuted at number 36 on the Billboard 200 charts. Speaking bluntly, Cutter said he has plenty of more music to offer fans to suppress their longing for the old Cudi. I don't even feel obligated to do Man on the Moon 3 anymore, he said. As of right now, people should just get that off their minds. That's not ever going to happen. It'd be different if the first two were platinum. They're not even platinum. Man on the Moon 1 is like 860,000 sold. It's hanging on by a thread. In September, Cudi decides to go on a rant attacking Kanye and Drake of all people. I need y'all to know I got so many haters within the industry, and these clowns know I'm about to crush their entire existence. Everyone thinks they're so great, talking top 5 and be having 30 people write songs for them. Let me tell you something. My tweets apply to who they apply. Ye, Drake, whoever. These niggas don't give a damn about me, and they ain't messing with me. Niggas keep you close when they see how powerful you are by yourself. When they see your greatness, out of fear. Anybody got an issue with my words, I'm glad. If you feel me, don't be scared to use your voice. I was for so long out of blind loyalty. From here, I'll let the music speak. As you were, peace and love to my supporters, and true ones, cut her out. This was bizarre because Cudi had performed progressively worse in his career the more he isolated himself and did everything on his own. He had built up these enemies in his head, just like the Emperor. There was a level of paranoia Kid Cudi had towards Drake, who not only offered to remix his Day and Night song way back in 2007, but also appeared in the Pursuit of Happiness music video, and never said anything ill towards Kid Cudi. Kanye West had just put him on his album earlier that year. So why was he doing this other than paranoia? During a show on the St. Pablo tour in September of 2016, Kanye would respond to Cudi on stage. Do you know how many people wish they could be signed to good music? West told the crowd. Get their life changed, have an opportunity. Never forget that. I'm so hurt. I feel so disrespected. Kid Cudi, we are 2 black men in a racist world. Don't ever mention my name in a bad manner. None of y'all. Kanye West would forgive Cudi only 6 days later on stage. The most important artist of the past 10 years, the most influential, and I hope he's doing well, West told the crowd between singing. I just want to take this time out to say Kid Cudi is my brother, the most influential artist of the past 10 years. It was soon after in October that Cudi had checked himself into rehab for suicidal urges. But once he was released, he was brought out by Kanye West on tour to perform Father Stretch My Hands. Kid Cudi's next album, Passion Pain Demon Slayin', released on December 16th. It didn't sell amazingly well. It did 50,000 first week, but the fans loved it. There was production from Mike Dean, Plain Pat, and Dot the Genius. There was no Emil back, but this was the Cudi that the fans had missed. He had 2 features from Andre 3000, Travis Scott, Pharrell, and even Willow Smith on there. He was finally collaborating with people again, and his career didn't look like it was doomed anymore. The next news of a Kid Cudi album was not just Kid Cudi, but a joint album between Kid Cudi and Kanye West. Me and Cudi album June 8th. It's called Kids See Ghost. That's the name of our group. This project was released in that June month of good music releases where Ye was released, Pusha T's Daytona, Tiana Taylor's album, and Kids See Ghost. This album was 7 tracks and incredible on all fronts. We got production from Plain Pat all over it, as well as all of Kanye West's producers. It would sell incredibly well at 142,000 units first week. Critics loved it, the fans loved it, but most importantly, I loved it. Flawless album and my favorite that year. Since then, both Man on the Moon 1 and 2 had gone platinum, and he was teasing his next album at the end of 2020 titled Intergalactic. But a big switch up happened when he did a song with Eminem in which he says the trilogy continues. And Man on the Moon 3 was released to massive success. Number 2 had it not been for Taylor Swift's surprise release, and on the album, it brings fans back to a similar feel. Production from the OGs, Emil, Plain Pat, and Dot the Genius, with a mix of sounds from Mike Dean and Anthony Kilhofer, but also incorporating newer producers with a fresh sound, mainly Take a Day Trip. Features were minimal, but above all else, this album should show Kid Cudi that isolation is dangerous. When he was alone, not only was his life going in a downward spiral, isolation drives depression, which Cudi has rapped about throughout his career, which then leads to drug abuse to cope with it, eventually leading him to have to go to rehab. But his career was falling apart, as was the quality of his music, according to his longtime fans. He breaks out of that fortress he built for himself, and he brought himself back to heights he hasn't experienced since the start of his career. A massively successful week of selling more than you did with your debut album first week, in a modern era where it's harder to do those similar numbers, an Adidas collaboration, shoe of your own, and love from both his fans and contemporaries. At this point, Kid Cudi is riding on an insane high, and I hope it continues for him. Let me know what y'all thought of Kid Cudi's career in the comments, and if you enjoyed this episode, on your screen is a playlist of the entire series, so check that out. Peace.